My daughter screamed at me, "We're not your bank." Minutes later, the lawyer announced the entire inheritance was in my name. I never thought the most painful words of my life would come from the mouth of the child I carried for 9 months. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would. And if you, for just a second, feel like this sounds familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me to keep unburdening myself. My name is Carmen Morales. I'm 68 years old, and my whole life unfolded on the familiar streets of San Antonio, Texas. I've been a widow for 11 years, since my Robert died of a heart attack while fixing the roof of our modest house in the Prospect Hill neighborhood. That day, I lost my partner, my rock, my reason to smile each morning when the neighbor's rooster woke us before dawn. Robert was a construction worker. I was a seamstress, working from home. Together, we raised 3 children: Lauren, the oldest, now 42, Michael, 39, and Sophia, the youngest, at 35. None of them ever knew hunger, thanks to God and our chapped hands. Robert hauled bags of cement under the blistering Texas sun while I sewed school uniforms until my eyes watered with exhaustion and the light from the bare bulb barely illuminated the needle. I remember nights when my fingers bled from pinpricks, but I couldn't stop. We had to pay for Lauren's school fees, Michael's new shoes, Sophia's first communion dress. Every dollar earned was a dollar invested in them. Robert and I ate beans and rice so they could have a pot roast on Sundays. We wore the same worn-out clothes while they got new pants at the start of every school year. When Robert died, I was 57 and had a meager Social Security check that barely covered the gas and electricity. But I kept sewing. I kept working, because a mother doesn't give up. Lauren married an engineer and moved to Plano, to a big house with a yard and a swimming pool. Michael found a job at a car manufacturing plant in Denver and lives in a gated community with his wife and my 2 grandsons. Sophia, my baby, studied business and now runs a jewelry business here in San Antonio, in a fancy shopping district where I could never afford a thing. I stayed in my little house in Prospect Hill, alone, with my memories, my saints on the wall, my Singer sewing machine I inherited from my mother, and the smell of strong coffee I brewed on the stovetop every morning like a sacred ritual. But 6 months ago, everything changed. One morning in March, I woke up with a sharp pain in my chest. I couldn't breathe properly. It was a struggle just to get to the bathroom. I called Lauren. No answer. I called Michael. Voicemail. I called Sophia. "I can't right now, Mom. I'm with a client." I ended up in the emergency room thanks to Stella, my 74-year-old neighbor, who found me sitting on the front step, clutching my chest and gasping like a fish out of water. The diagnosis was clear: heart failure. I needed expensive medications, monthly checkups, rest. I couldn't keep sewing 12 hours a day. When I told my children, each one responded in their own way. Lauren told me over the phone, without even coming to see me, "Mom, I can't help you anymore. I have my own expenses. The kids, the mortgage, the private schools. You understand." Michael was more direct. "Mom, look into some government assistance. I have a family to support too." Sophia, my little one, the one I used to rock in my arms singing lullabies, looked at me with cold eyes and said, "Mom, you've lived your life. Now let us live ours." That sentence broke me in two, but the worst came later. Since I could no longer afford my house alone, Lauren offered to have me move in with her in Plano, temporarily, she said. I gratefully accepted, believing I would finally have the affection and company I so desperately needed. How wrong I was. I arrived at her house with my 2 old suitcases, the wool shawl Robert gave me for our anniversary, and my hopeful heart. Lauren greeted me with a forced smile. Her husband, David, didn't even say hello. He just nodded his head toward the end of the hallway. "Your room is down there. It's small, but it's what we have." The room was a 6 by 9 foot space, windowless, with a narrow bed and a closet that smelled of damp. The walls were gray, bare. It looked like a maid's room, and that's how I felt from the very first day, like the unpaid help. The first few days I tried to adapt. I got up early, made breakfast, cleaned the kitchen, swept the patio. Lauren would come running in, grab her coffee without looking at me, and leave. David would walk past me as if I were a piece of furniture. My grandchildren, two teenagers engrossed in their phones, barely spoke to me. When I tried to talk to them, they answered in monosyllables without looking up from their screens. One afternoon, after doing all the family's laundry, ironing shirts and pants, and preparing a meal that no one thanked me for, I sat in the kitchen with a cup of chamomile tea. My hands were trembling. The pain in my chest was returning. I took out my wallet. I had barely $30 inside. My Social Security check wouldn't arrive for another 2 weeks. I needed to buy my medications. Pills for my heart, for my blood pressure, for my cholesterol. Without them, the doctor had warned, I could have a heart attack at any moment. I took a deep breath and went to find Lauren. She was in the living room, scrolling through her phone while watching a show on the giant screen TV. "Honey," I began, my voice trembling, "I need to ask you for a favor." She didn't even turn around. "What is it, Mom?" "I need $50, Tim, for my prescriptions. I'll pay you back as soon as my check comes in, I promise." Lauren put her phone down on the Italian leather sofa and looked at me as if I had asked for a kidney. $50? Again? "Yes, honey. It's just that without the pills, We are not your bank, Mom." The shout echoed through the house. David came out of his study. The kids peeked their heads out of their rooms. Everyone was staring at me. Lauren stood up. Her face was red with fury. "I'm sick of it. Sick of you always needing something. Money, attention, special food because you can't have salt. Enough, Mom. We are not your bank." Tears began to stream down my cheeks. I couldn't believe it. My daughter, my little girl, the one I cared for when she had chicken pox and I didn't sleep for 3 straight nights. The one I defended when the girls at school made fun of her clothes. The one I held when her first boyfriend broke her heart. "Honey, I need the medicine." "Well, sell something. Sell your sewing machine. Sell whatever. Just leave us alone." David nodded from the doorway. "Your mother's right, Carmen. This is too much." I stood there, paralyzed. I couldn't breathe. The room was spinning. Without another word, I went into my room, closed the door, and collapsed onto the bed. I cried in silence, biting my fist so they wouldn't hear me. I cried for my Robert, for my lost youth, for my ruined hands, for my trampled dignity. And in the midst of that bitter weeping, I felt something different growing inside me. Rage. For the first time in my life, I felt rage toward my own children. I didn't sleep that night. I stared at the cracked ceiling, thinking about everything I had sacrificed. And I asked myself a question I had never dared to ask before. Was it worth it? I spent that first night back in my own bed, between sheets that smelled of mothballs and memories. The mattress sagged in the middle, where Robert and I had slept in each other's arms for 30 years. I curled up in that hollow, feeling his absence like a wound that would never fully heal. But for the first time in 6 months, I slept without startling awake, without fear of being a nuisance, without feeling like I was in the way. The next day, I woke up with the neighbor's rooster. Sunlight streamed through the curtainless window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I got up slowly, feeling every one of my 68 years in my knees and back. I walked barefoot through my house. I ran my hand over the walls that Robert had painted sky blue because he said the color reminded him of me. I touched the shelf where the porcelain figurines I'd collected for years still stood. I opened the closet and found Robert's clothes still hanging there, because I never had the heart to get rid of them. I made myself coffee on the old stovetop that made a strange noise but still worked. I sat in the backyard, under the bougainvillea that was now wild and overgrown, covering almost the entire clothesline. The birds were singing. The air smelled of damp earth from the night's rain, and I cried. But this time I didn't cry from sadness. I cried from relief. My cell phone started ringing around 10 in the morning. It was Lauren. I didn't answer. She called again. Then Michael. Then Sophia. One after another, like vultures who had just realized their prey had escaped. I let it ring until they got tired. In the afternoon, the messages started. Lauren. Mom, where are you? I'm worried. Michael. Are you back in San Antonio? Let us know you're okay. Sophia. Mom, don't be dramatic. Call us. I didn't answer any of them. I turned off my phone and put it in a drawer. That evening, Stella, my neighbor, knocked on the door. She was holding a Tupperware container with a chicken casserole and rice. "Honey, I heard you were back. It's good to see you." I invited her in. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where we had shared so many coffees and neighborhood gossip over the years. "You look tired," she said, looking at me with those wise eyes that only age can give. "I am tired, Stella. So very tired." "What happened with your kids? Why did you come back alone?" And I told her everything. Every detail, every humiliation, every hurtful word. Stella listened in silence, nodding her head from time to time. Her lips pursed in indignation. When I finished, she took my hands in hers, rough and spotted with age. "Kids don't come with a manual, honey. Some are born grateful, others are born with a hole in their chest that you can never fill, no matter how much you give them. You did your part. You don't owe them anything anymore." "But I feel guilty, Stella. I feel like I failed as a mother." "Guilty? You? Oh, Carmen, you broke your back for them. You gave them everything. The problem isn't you. The problem is them, for not knowing how to appreciate it." Her words were like a balm on an open wound. "So, what are you going to do now?" she asked. "I don't know. Stay here, I guess. Live on my Social Security. Look for some sewing jobs to earn a little extra. And what about your brother-in-law in Spain?" I froze. I had never told her anything about Henry. Stella smiled. "Carmen, I've been your neighbor for 30 years. I know when letters arrive from Spain. I know you stayed in touch with him, and I know he's a good man." I couldn't help but smile back. Yes, he is a good man. And he's sick. He's leaving me something in his will. "He's leaving you something?" Her eyes widened. "An apartment in Salamanca. Savings. I don't know exactly how much, but enough to live with dignity, he says." Stella stood up and gave me a tight hug. "You see? The Lord provides, honey. He provides." 2 weeks went by. In that time, my house became a home again. I cleaned every corner. I fixed up the garden. I trimmed the bougainvillea. I painted the bedroom walls with the help of Stella's son. I put fresh flowers on the table. I started sewing again. A neighbor commissioned a dress for her daughter's quinceañera. Another asked me to alter some curtains. The money wasn't much, but it gave me independence. Purpose. In the afternoons, I'd walk to the park. I'd sit on a bench and watch the families go by. Young mothers with their babies. Grandparents playing with their grandchildren. Elderly couples holding hands. Sometimes it hurt to see that. The life I could have had if my children had been different. But I no longer drowned in that pain. I observed it, acknowledged it, and let it go. One afternoon, as I was watering the plants, my cell phone rang. It was an unknown number with a country code for Spain. My heart skipped a beat. "Hello," I answered, my voice trembling. "Mrs. Carmen Morales?" "Yes, this is she. My name is Richard Fuentes. I'm an attorney and notary in Salamanca. I'm representing Mr. Henry Morrison." I felt my legs go weak. I sat down on the patio chair. "Did something happen to Henry?" "Mr. Morrison passed away 3 days ago. It was peaceful, at his home, with palliative care. He asked me to contact you." Tears began to stream down my cheeks. Henry was gone, the last of the Morrison men, the last tie to Robert. "I'm very sorry for your loss, ma'am. I know you were close." "Thank you," I whispered. "Mr. Morrison left a very specific will. I need you to travel to Spain for the official reading. There are other beneficiaries who will also be notified." "Other beneficiaries?" "Your children, ma'am. Lauren, Michael, and Sophia. They are included in the will." A chill ran down my spine. "My children?" "That's right. Everyone must be present for the reading. It's a legal requirement. Can you travel within the next 2 weeks?" I don't know if I can afford the ticket." "Mr. Morrison left funds specifically to cover your travel expenses. I will send you the details by email. Do you have an email address?" I gave him the address Sophia had helped me create years ago, which I almost never used. "Perfect. In the next few days, you will receive all the information. Plane tickets, hotel reservation, and the date and time of the appointment at my office. Everything is arranged. And my children? Do they know yet? I am contacting them today. They will all receive the same summons." We hung up. I sat there, phone in hand, trying to process what I had just heard. Henry was dead. He had left me something, but he had also included my children in his will. Why? I couldn't sleep that night. My mind was racing. What could Henry have written in that will? Why did he want all of us to be present? What message was he sending from the grave? The next morning, my phone exploded. Lauren, Michael, and Sophia called me almost at the same time. This time, I answered, "Mom? Where have you been? We were so worried," Lauren said in a falsely sweet voice. "At my house, in San Antonio. Why did you leave like that? Without saying anything?" I said something. I left a note. "Mom, please. We're sorry if we made you feel bad. We've just been so stressed." "Lauren, did you get a call from a lawyer in Spain?" An uncomfortable silence. "Yes. He called me," she finally admitted. "He says Uncle Henry passed away." "That's right. And that he left a will. And that we all have to go to Salamanca." "Correct. Did you know he was leaving you something?" "He mentioned it before he died." Another silence. I could almost hear the wheels turning in her head, calculating, scheming. "Mom, can we talk? Come see you? All three of us want to come." "That's not necessary. Please, we want to fix things. We miss you." I almost laughed at the audacity. "We'll see each other in Spain, Lauren. At the reading of the will. But Mom, goodbye." I hung up. Michael called minutes later with the same speech, then Sophia. All three wanted to come to San Antonio, talk to me, clear the air. But I knew the truth. They just wanted to make sure I wouldn't cut them out of the inheritance. I told all three of them the same thing. We would see each other in Spain. 2 weeks later, I was at the San Antonio International Airport with my old suitcase and my shawl. It was the first time I'd ever been on a plane. Robert had always dreamed of traveling, but we never had the money for it. As the plane took off and the city grew small beneath me, I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't fear. It wasn't sadness. It was freedom. I was heading into the unknown, to a country I had never seen, to a meeting with the children who had abandoned me. But for the first time in my life, I was going on my own terms. And that changed everything. Salamanca greeted me with a gray sky and stone streets that looked like they were straight out of an old postcard. The hotel Henry had booked for me was modest but clean, with a window overlooking a small plaza where Spaniards drank coffee at outdoor cafes, wrapped in coats and scarves. It was October. The air smelled of rain and fresh bread. The cathedral bells rang every hour, reminding me that I was very far from home. I settled into my room, unpacked my suitcase, and sat on the bed. My hands were shaking. The appointment with the lawyer was the next day at 11 in the morning. Lauren, Michael, and Sophia were scheduled to arrive that night. The lawyer had booked us rooms in the same hotel. I didn't want to see them yet. I wasn't ready. I went for a walk that afternoon. The cobblestone streets were hard on my knees. But I needed air. I needed to think. I went into the cathedral and sat in a pew at the back. Light filtered through the stained glass windows, painting the floor with colors. I lit a candle for Henry, for Robert, for the woman I used to be, and for the woman I was trying to become. "Are you Carmen?" A voice pulled me from my thoughts. I turned. It was a man in his 40s with a gray suit and a leather briefcase. He extended his hand. "I'm Richard Fuentes, the attorney. I recognized you from the photo Mr. Morrison kept in his apartment." "A pleasure to meet you," I said, shaking his hand. "May I sit for a moment?" I nodded. He sat beside me, placing his briefcase on the floor. "I wanted to speak with you before the official reading. There are some things you should know." "What things?" "Mr. Morrison was a client of mine for 15 years. He amended his will 3 times. The last time was 2 months ago, when he knew his illness was terminal." "And what did he change?" Richard took a deep breath. "He included very specific clauses, conditions. Mr. Morrison wasn't just a generous man, Mrs. Morales. He was an observant man. He told me a lot about you, about your children, about how they treated you." I felt my stomach churn. "He knew everything, didn't he? He knew more than you think. The last few letters you sent him were revealing. You never complained directly, but he read between the lines. The change in your handwriting, the tone of your words, the silences." Tears threatened to spill. I bit my lip to hold them back. "Tomorrow is going to be a difficult day," Richard continued. "Your children are expecting to receive something, and technically they will. but not in the way they imagine. What do you mean? Mr. Morrison left very clear instructions. He wanted everyone present not just for the reading of the will, but for something more. A message. A message? Richard smiled sadly. You'll understand tomorrow. I just wanted you to know that you're not alone. That Mr. Morrison thought of everything, and that no matter what happens in that office, you will walk out of there with what you deserve: dignity and justice. He stood up, picking up his briefcase. I'll see you tomorrow at 11. Get some rest, Mrs. Morales. I watched him walk away between the pews, his silhouette framed by the light from the stained glass windows. I stayed there for a long time, trying to understand what awaited me. I barely slept that night. I could hear voices in the hotel hallway, laughter, hurried footsteps. I knew it was them, my children. They had arrived. Part of me wanted to open the door and go out to them, to see them, to hug them. But another part, the part that had learned to protect itself, kept me locked inside. At 5 minutes to 11 the next morning, I went down to the lobby. The three of them were there. Lauren in her impeccable pantsuit and designer handbag, Michael in his leather jacket and dark sunglasses, Sophia in her elegant dress and perfect makeup. When they saw me, Lauren was the first to approach. Mom, she said, trying to hug me. I took a step back. Good morning, I said in a cold voice. Lauren's expression faltered. Michael and Sophia exchanged uncomfortable glances. Mom, please, Lauren insisted. Forgive us. We were horrible to you. Yes, Mommy, Sophia added in a high-pitched voice. We were stressed. We didn't mean to make you feel bad. Michael just nodded, his hands in his pockets. The lawyer is waiting for us, I said simply, walking toward the exit. They followed me in silence. Mr. Fuentes' office was a 10-minute walk from the hotel, in an old building with wooden stairs that creaked with every step. The secretary showed us into a conference room with a long table and high-backed chairs. Richard Fuentes entered precisely on time, wearing a gown and carrying several thick folders. He sat at the head of the table. I was on his right. Lauren, Michael, and Sophia were on the other side by side, like an army ready for battle. Good morning. Thank you for coming all this way, Richard began. We are here for the reading of the last will and testament of Mr. Henry Morrison, deceased on the 3rd of October of this year. He took out a thick document, sealed with red wax. Before I begin, I must clarify that this will was written with the testator's full mental lucidity, in the presence of witnesses, and with all corresponding legal formalities. It is incontestable. Lauren leaned forward. Michael took off his sunglasses. Sophia wrung her hands on the table. Richard began to read. I, Henry Morrison, being of sound mind, dispose of my assets as follows. The silence was so thick you could hear everyone breathing. To my sister-in-law, Carmen Morales, who for over 20 years wrote me letters, called me on important dates, and never forgot that I existed, I bequeath the entirety of my estate. Lauren let out a choked gasp. Michael sat up straight in his chair. Sophia's eyes went wide. Richard continued, unperturbed. This estate includes a 3-bedroom apartment in the historic center of Salamanca, valued at 250,000 euros, a savings account at Banco Santander with a balance of 180,000 euros, various investments with an approximate value of 100,000 euros, total estimated estate, 530,000 euros. The air was sucked out of the room. 530,000 euros. Over $500,000. I was frozen. I couldn't process the number. It was impossible. It was too much. Wait, Lauren interrupted, her voice trembling. Everything? It's all for her? Allow me to finish, Richard said without looking at her. Furthermore, to my niece and nephews, Lauren, Michael, and Sophia Morales, I bequeath the following inheritance. The three of them leaned forward, hopeful. To each, a sealed envelope containing a personal letter I wrote for them in my final days. A deathly silence. A letter? Michael nearly shouted. Just a damn letter? Michael, please. Lauren tried to calm him, but her own voice was trembling with contained rage. Richard took 3 white envelopes from one of his folders and placed them on the table. These are the letters. You may read them here or in private. It is your decision. Sophia took her envelope with trembling hands. She opened it right there. She began to read. Her face crumbled with every line. Tears started to fall. Lauren and Michael opened theirs as well. The room filled with a heavy silence, broken only by Sophia's choked sobs. I didn't know what to say. What to do? "May I know what the letters say?" I finally asked. Richard nodded. "Mr. Morrison authorized me to read them aloud if you so requested." "Please," I whispered. Richard took Lauren's letter and began to read. "Lauren, your mother wrote to me for 20 years. In her letters, she told me about you, your accomplishments, your children, always with pride, never with reproach. But in her last letters, the words changed. They became sad, empty. She told me, without telling me, that you became someone she no longer recognizes, someone who screams, someone who scorns. I leave you this letter so you know that when your mother dies, and that day will come, you will be left with all your money, but without her forgiveness. And believe me, that will be a heavier burden." Lauren was crying with her head in her hands. Richard continued with Michael's letter. "Michael, your mother pawned her wedding ring to pay for your surgery when you were 16. You never told your father. She never held it against you. She worked twice as hard to get it back. When you got your job and your house, you never offered to help her, only to forget her. I leave you this inheritance, the guilt of knowing you could have, and you didn't." Michael stared at the floor, his jaw tight. Finally, Sophia's letter. "Sophia, your mother fought for your life when you were born premature. She didn't sleep. She didn't eat. She only prayed. She gave you everything so you could get an education, so you could succeed. And when you succeeded, you told her, 'You've lived your life, now let us live ours.' She wrote those words in her last letter, crying. I leave you this inheritance, the memory that you were her baby and you became her executioner." Sophia was sobbing uncontrollably. Michael stood up from the table and stormed out, slamming the door. Lauren remained there, motionless, tears falling onto her expensive suit. Richard closed the folders. "Mrs. Morales, do you wish to add anything?" I looked at my children, at the broken Lauren, at the devastated Sophia, at the empty chair where Michael had been, and I said only one thing: "We are not your bank. Remember, Lauren? That's what you told me." I stood up, grabbing my shawl. "Now I understand you were right. I shouldn't be anyone's bank, not even yours." And I walked out of that office with my head held high, leaving behind the weeping of those who had once been my entire world. Outside, the Salamanca sun was shining through the clouds. For the first time in 68 years, I felt like I deserved to stand in its light. I walked through the streets of Salamanca with no destination, my shawl clutched to my chest, and my heart beating so hard I thought it would burst. My legs were shaking, but I kept moving, putting distance between me and that office, between me and my children's tears. I sat on a bench in the Plaza Mayor. All around me, tourists were taking pictures and families were sharing ice cream despite the October chill. Children ran between the arches. Elderly couples walked arm in arm, slowly, savoring each step. I took a handkerchief from my purse and wiped away tears I hadn't realized were falling. They weren't tears of sadness, nor of joy. They were tears of liberation. Like when you take off a shoe that's been pinching you all day and your foot can finally breathe. 530,000 euros. I couldn't even imagine that amount. My entire life I had worked for cents, for dollars, for coins I counted one by one before going to the grocery store. And now, suddenly, I had more money than I could spend in the rest of my life. But the most important thing wasn't the money. It was what it represented. Validation. Acknowledgement. The proof that someone, somewhere in the world, had seen my worth when my own children couldn't. My cell phone rang. It was Lauren. I didn't answer. It rang again. Michael. I ignored it. Then Sophia. I turned the phone off and put it away. I spent the rest of the day walking through the city. I went into old bookshops that smelled of aged paper. I sat in cafes where I had hot chocolate and churros, something I'd never allowed myself, because it always seemed like an unnecessary luxury. I bought a soft wool scarf in a small shop because I liked it and because I could. For the first time in my life, I spent money on myself without feeling guilty. I returned to the hotel as evening fell. Richard Fuentes was waiting for me in the lobby. "Mrs. Morales, can we speak for a moment?" We went up to a small sitting area on the second floor. He was carrying a new folder. "Your children came to see me after you left," he said. "All three of them. They wanted to contest the will." I felt a pang in my stomach. Can they do that? Technically, they can try, but they have no legal grounds. The will is ironclad. The witnesses are all living, and Mr. Morrison left documented evidence of his relationship with you. The letters you sent him, phone records, photographs, all meticulously filed. So, I explained to them that any attempt to contest would not only fail, but would trigger a special clause Mr. Morrison included in the will. What clause? Richard opened the folder and showed me a document. "If any of your children attempt to contest the will or harass you legally in any way, an automatic donation of 50,000 euros will be activated in each of their names, but designated for a foundation for elderly women who are victims of family abuse in Mexico." My jaw dropped. The donation would be made publicly in their names, with an explanatory note as to why the clause was triggered. In other words, if they attack you, the whole world will know how they treated their mother. Henry thought of everything. Mr. Morrison was a corporate lawyer before he retired. He knew the law well, and human nature even better. He knew exactly how to protect you. Richard closed the folder. "Your children left my office an hour ago. I don't think they'll be bothering you again, at least not legally." That night, alone in my room, I turned on my cell phone. I had 37 missed calls and 22 messages. I read them one by one. Lauren: "Mom, we need to talk, please." Michael: "This isn't fair. We're your children." Sophia: "I can't believe you're doing this to us. After everything." Lauren again: "Are you going to keep it all? Are you that selfish?" Michael: "We always knew you had a favorite, and it wasn't us." The messages grew more bitter, more resentful, more revealing of who they really were. The last message was from Lauren, sent just an hour ago. "Fine, Mom. Keep your money. I hope it makes you happy, because we won't be there for you when you need us anymore." I read that message 3 times, and instead of pain, I felt something like relief, because they had finally told the truth. They had finally shown their true faces without the masks of false love and familial obligation. I didn't reply to them. Instead, I wrote a new message, for all 3 of them, in a group chat I created in that moment. "Children, for decades you were my reason for living, but living only for others is a slow way to die. Henry reminded me that I deserve to exist too. I hold no resentment toward you, but I also owe you no more explanations. I wish you the best. Take care of your families the way I took care of you. And if you have children one day, remember, love that isn't watered will wither and die. Mom." I sent the message and left the group. I blocked their numbers. I blocked their contacts on the social media accounts Sophia had taught me to use years ago. With each block, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The next morning, I had an appointment with Richard to sign the final inheritance papers, and also to see the apartment that was now mine. The apartment was on a narrow street in the historic center, in a stone building from the 17th century. We climbed 3 flights of wooden stairs. Richard opened the door with an old-fashioned key. "Go ahead, Mrs. Morales. Welcome to your new home." I entered slowly. The apartment had high ceilings with exposed wooden beams. Large windows overlooked the cobblestone street. A small but modern kitchen. A living room with a fireplace. 2 bedrooms and a study full of books. The walls were decorated with photographs. I walked closer to look at them. They were pictures of Henry, as a young man, newly arrived in Spain, in his law office, on trips to different European cities. And there, on the main mantelpiece, was a photo of me, one I had sent him 5 years ago, taken in the backyard of my house in San Antonio, next to the Bougainvillea. I was smiling at the camera, wearing my shawl, my hands covered in dirt from working in the garden. Beneath the photo, in Henry's elegant handwriting, it said, "Carmen, the sister I chose." I broke down. I fell to my knees in front of that mantelpiece and cried as I hadn't cried in years. I cried for Henry, who saw me when no one else did. I cried for Robert, who loved me with everything he had. I cried for the woman I had been, and for the woman I was discovering I could become. Richard stood quietly in the doorway, giving me space. When I was finally able to get up, he handed me one more envelope. "This is from Mr. Morrison. He asked me to give it to you here at this moment." I opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a handwritten letter. "Dearest Carmen, if you are reading this, it means I am gone, but it also means you are finally where you deserve to be, in a place that is yours, with resources that are yours, with a life that is yours. I know this doesn't erase the pain your children caused you. I wish it could, but I hope it at least gives you what they never did. Options. Now you can choose to stay in Spain or return to the US, to travel or stay put, to forgive them or not, to speak to them or not. It is all your decision. For 20 years, you sent me letters filled with love, with questions about my life, with genuine concern. You never asked me for anything. You only reminded me that I mattered. That, my dear sister-in-law, is priceless. This apartment was my sanctuary. Now it is yours. Use it as you wish. Sell it if you prefer. But if you decide to stay, I hope you find the peace you deserve here. My last wish is for you to be happy. Not out of obligation, not to please others, but because you have finally decided that your happiness matters too. I love you very much, Carmen, and though you may not believe it, Robert would be so proud of you. With all my love, Henry." I folded the letter carefully and held it to my heart. "How long are you planning to stay in Salamanca, Mrs. Morales?" Richard asked. I looked around the room. The wooden beams, the light streaming through the windows, the books on the shelves, the photo of me on the mantelpiece. "I don't know yet," I answered, "but I think I'll stay long enough to find out." Richard smiled. "The apartment is yours. The bank accounts are in your name. Everything is in order. If you need anything at all, here is my card." When he left, I was alone in this space that was now mine. I opened the windows. The cool Salamanca air rushed in, carrying the sound of bells and voices in a Spanish accent different from my own. I sat on the sofa that had been Henry's. I closed my eyes. And for the first time in 68 years, I didn't think about what I had to do for others. I thought about what I wanted to do for myself. And that, I discovered, was the true beginning of my freedom. The first days in Salamanca were strange. I'd wake up early out of habit, but there was no breakfast to make for anyone, no laundry to wash, no floors to sweep to please critical eyes. There was only silence, and that silence, instead of frightening me, began to sound like music. I explored the apartment as if it were a museum. I opened drawers and found old letters Henry had kept. Letters from me, all sorted by date, tied with ribbons, each one preserved as if it were a treasure. I read some of them and didn't recognize my own words. In those letters, I was a different woman, one who proudly shared anecdotes about her children, one who asked about Henry's health with genuine concern, one who signed off, "With love, your sister-in-law Carmen," without imagining those words were worth more than any inheritance. In the study, I found a journal. The last entry was dated 2 weeks before his death. Spoke to Carmen on the phone today. Her voice sounded muted. She says she's fine, but I know she's lying. I can hear the exhaustion, the neglect. It's the same tone my mother had when my father left her alone with 7 children, and her pride wouldn't let her ask for help. Carmen deserves more. She deserves everything. I changed the will this morning. Let my niece and nephews learn what I learned too late. That love is not inherited, it is cultivated, and they let the garden die. I closed the journal with tears in my eyes. Henry had seen me, truly seen me. When my own children looked at me and only saw an obligation, he saw a person who deserved respect. I began to establish a routine. In the mornings, I'd go down to the bakery on the corner and buy fresh bread. The woman who worked there, Rosa, was my age and always greeted me with a smile. "Where are you from?" she asked me one day. "From the United States. Texas." "Oh, so far away. And what brings you here? An inheritance? And a second chance." Rosa nodded as if she understood perfectly. Sometimes you have to travel very far to find what was right in front of you. In the afternoons, I would walk through the city. I discovered little bookshops where the owners recommended novels. I found a cafe that made a latte just the way I liked it. I sat in the Plaza Mayor and watched life go by without feeling like I had to be productive every second. One afternoon, while reading on a park bench, a woman with white hair and lively blue eyes sat down next to me. "Good afternoon. May I?" "Of course. My name is Magdalena. I live nearby. I've seen you walking around lately. I'm Carmen. I just arrived from the United States. On vacation? No. I came to stay, I think." Magdalena smiled. "How lovely. And do you have family here?" "No. I don't have family anywhere anymore." The words came out on their own and surprised me, but they were true. I had biological children, yes, but family, that network of people who catch you when you fall, I didn't have that anymore. "Well," Magdalena said, "then we'll have to build a new one. I don't have children either. My husband died 10 years ago. But I have friends, a group of us ladies who get together on Thursdays for tea to talk about our lives. Would you like to come?" "I don't know. I wouldn't want to impose—" "Nonsense, dear. We've all lost something. We're all learning to live again. Come on Thursday. I'll write down my address." That Thursday, I went to Magdalena's home. It was a small apartment filled with plants and photographs. There, I met Teresa, a widow like me, Pilar, who never married and worked her whole life as a teacher, and Amparo, who got divorced at 60 when she discovered her husband had another family. We had tea and cookies. We talked about our lives without filters or judgment. I told my story. They listened without interrupting. When I finished, Pilar said, "Children are no guarantee of anything, Carmen. Not of company, not of love. I spent 40 years teaching other people's children while my own nephews never came to visit. In the end, family isn't built with blood. It's built with presence." Teresa added, "My daughter lives in Madrid. She calls me once a month. Out of obligation. The ones who sit with me when I'm sick are these ladies you see here. The family we choose will always be stronger than the one we're given by chance." I left Magdalena's house that afternoon with a heart lighter than it had been in years. I had found something I didn't know I needed. Sisterhood. Women who understood the pain without needing long explanations. The weeks passed. The United States felt more and more distant. One day I got a message from Stella, my neighbor in San Antonio. "Honey, your house is still here. I'm keeping an eye on it. But I wanted to tell you that Sophia came by asking if I knew where you were. I told her I knew nothing. You're okay, right?" I replied, "I'm better than ever, Stella. Thank you for watching the house. I'll let you know soon what I'm going to do with it." The truth was, I didn't know what to do. That little house represented 30 years of my life with Robert, but it also represented pain, loneliness, the nights I spent crying alone after he died. The days I worked to exhaustion to pay off debts my children never knew existed. One afternoon, while drinking coffee on my balcony, I made a decision. I called Richard Fuentes. "Mr. Fuentes, I want to sell my house in San Antonio. Can you help me with the process from here?" "Of course, Mrs. Morales. Do you have any idea what you want to do with the money?" "Yes, I want to donate it." "Donate it?" "To a foundation that helps elderly women. Women who are going through what I went through. Who have ungrateful children. Who have no resources and no options." Richard paused. "You know, Mrs. Morales, Mr. Morrison would be very proud of you." "I hope so." I sold the house for $150,000. With that money, Richard helped me create an emergency fund managed by an organization already working with senior women in San Antonio. The money would be used to pay for medicine, rent, and legal advice. When I signed the final papers, I felt like I was closing a chapter. That house was no longer mine. That pain was no longer mine. That life was no longer mine. One day in December, 3 months after arriving in Salamanca, my cell phone rang. It was a number I hadn't saved but recognized immediately. It was Sophia. I hesitated. I stared at the screen for several rings. Finally, I answered. "Hello? Mom?" Sophia's voice was broken. "Mom, please don't hang up." "What do you want, Sophia?" I need to talk to you. I need to apologize. It's too late for that. I know, and I don't expect you to forgive me. But I need you to know that I've been going to therapy, and my therapist made me see things. Horrible things that I did, that we all said. And now you've come looking for absolution? No, I've come to tell you that you were right. That we were ungrateful. That we used you. That we wrung you dry until there was nothing left and then threw you out like trash. Tears started to roll down my cheeks, but my voice remained steady. I'm glad you realize that, Sophia. Truly. But it doesn't change anything. Can I come see you? In Spain? I just want to see you. To hug you. To tell you in person. No. Mom, please. Sophia, listen to me very carefully. I loved you with everything I had. I gave you everything I could, and you all destroyed me. You told me I had already lived my life. Remember? Yes, I remember. And I'm ashamed of it every single day. Well, now I'm living the rest of my life, the part I have left. And in this part, I decide who comes in, and you, my love, are not invited. Mom, I wish you the best, Sophia. Truly. I hope you're happy, but far away from me. And Lauren? And Michael? Are you never going to forgive us? Maybe someday. But that day isn't today, and it probably won't be tomorrow. It might never come, and that's okay too. Mom, Goodbye, Sophia. Take care. I hung up, and this time, I didn't cry. I didn't feel guilty. I felt peace, because I had made the hardest decision of my life, to choose myself, to set boundaries, to say no, to close doors that had hurt me. Magdalena was right. Family is built with presence, not with blood. And I was building a new family here, in the cobblestone streets of Salamanca, among women who understood that love is not something you beg or bargain for. That night, I went out onto the balcony with a glass of red wine that Pilar had given me. The cathedral bells rang in the distance. The city glowed with Christmas lights. I looked up at the stars and spoke aloud. Henry, Robert, thank you for loving me when I didn't know how to love myself, for seeing me when I didn't know I existed. The cold wind caressed my face like an answer. And there, under the Spanish winter sky, thousands of miles from where I was born, I finally felt at home. Not because I had a place, but because I finally had myself. Christmas passed. Then New Year's. I celebrated them with Magdalena, Teresa, Pilar, and Amparo. We ate 12 grapes at midnight, following the Spanish tradition. We toasted to the year we were leaving behind and the one that was beginning. For the first time in decades, the holidays were not synonymous with loneliness disguised as family obligation. January came with a deep chill. The streets of Salamanca were covered in frost, and the plazas glittered under the timid winter sun. I continued my routine: bakery in the morning, walks in the afternoon, reading before bed. But something had changed inside me. I was no longer just surviving. I was living, discovering what I liked to do when no one needed me for anything. One Tuesday morning, while having coffee at my favorite cafe, a young woman sat at the table next to mine. She was crying silently, staring at her phone. She wore expensive clothes, but her eyes were puffy from weeping. I couldn't help myself. I approached her. "Excuse me, are you all right?" She looked up, startled. Yes, thank you. It's just, my mother just passed away. I'm so sorry. The worst part is, she died alone, in a nursing home. I put her there 2 years ago because I didn't have time to take care of her. Because of my job, my husband, my kids, there was always an excuse. Her voice broke. And now she's gone. And the last thing she ever said to me was, "Honey, I hope when you're old, your children treat you better than you treated me." Tears streamed down her face. I sat down beside her. "Do you know what's most terrible?" She continued. "She's right. My children already talk to me with the same tone I used with her, with annoyance, like I'm a burden. And they're only 15 and 12. What's going to happen when I'm 70? I passed her a napkin. "You still have time to change that," I said softly, "to break the cycle, to teach them that old age isn't a curse or a burden. It's a privilege not everyone gets to have." She looked me in the eyes. "Do you have children?" I had 3. Now I just have peace. What happened? I learned that the love you give doesn't always come back, and that it's okay to let go of what hurts you, even if it shares your blood. We talked for over an hour. I told her my story without drama or self-pity. Just the facts. She listened intently, wiping her tears from time to time. "And you don't miss them?" she finally asked. "I miss the children they were, not the adults they became." When we parted, she hugged me. "Thank you for talking to me. I think I needed to hear this. Honor your mother by doing things differently with your children," I told her. "That's the best tribute." That conversation got me thinking. How many women like me were there in the world? How many had given everything and received nothing but neglect? How many were still trapped in toxic relationships with their own children because society told them family is sacred, no matter how much it destroys you? That night, I called Richard. I want to do something more with Henry's money, I told him. I want to create a specific program, something to help older women get out of situations of family abuse. What do you have in mind? A temporary shelter. A place where they can stay while they sort out pensions, divorces, separations from children who exploit them, with free legal advice, psychological support, training so they can work if they choose. That will require a considerable investment. I have the money, Richard. More than I'll ever need. What good is it if I don't use it for something that matters? Let me do some research. I'll call you back with options. 2 weeks later, Richard presented me with a complete project. He had found an old house on the outskirts of San Antonio that could be converted into a shelter. He had connections with therapists and lawyers willing to donate their time. He had calculated the operating costs for the first 3 years. With an initial investment of $200,000 and an operating fund of $50,000 a year, we could be up and running in 6 months, he explained. Let's do it, I said without hesitation. Are you sure? That's a lot of money, Mrs. Morales. More sure than I've ever been. This is what Henry would have wanted, what Robert would have applauded, and what I need to do. And so, Casa Esperanza, Hope House, was born. A shelter for women over 50 in situations of family abuse or neglect. It opened its doors in July. I couldn't go to the inauguration because my health wouldn't permit such a long trip. But I watched on a video call with Magdalena by my side. I saw the first 6 women arrive. Their tired faces, their sad eyes, their backs hunched from years of emotional burdens. But I also saw hope, the possibility of a new beginning. One of them, a 62-year-old woman named Beatriz, spoke to the local news cameras. My son had me living in a utility room while he rented out my house. He gave me $20 a week for everything. I thought I had no options, that I deserved that treatment for being old. But now I know I don't. I still deserve dignity. I cried watching that video, because Beatrice was me. She was all of us. The invisible ones, the forgotten ones, the ones the world considered disposable. In September, a letter arrived. The return address simply said, Lauren Morrison, Plano, TX. I left it on the table for 2 days without opening it. Finally, on a rainy afternoon, I did. Mom, I don't expect a reply. I just need you to read this. It's been almost 9 months since Salamanca. 9 months where I've had to look in the mirror and accept what I am. A horrible daughter. A person who mistreated the woman who gave her everything. I've been going to therapy. My marriage is in crisis because David and I realized we built our life on selfishness. My children treat me with the same contempt I treated you with, and it hurts. It hurts so much that some days I can't breathe. But I deserve this pain. It's my karma. My punishment. I saw the news about Hope House online. I saw your name on the foundation. I read the interviews with the women who were there, and I understood that you gave to strangers what we never let you give yourself, a place to heal. I'm not asking for forgiveness because I know I don't deserve it. I just want you to know that I finally understand, that I finally see what we did to you, and that if I could go back in time, I would do everything differently. Be happy, Mom. Even if it's far away from us. Even if it's without us. I love you. Even though I no longer have the right to say it. Lauren. I folded the letter carefully. I put it away in a box along with Henry's letters and the photos of Robert. Testimonies of lives that had touched mine. Some with genuine love. Others with a love that arrived far too late. I didn't write back. But I didn't tear up the letter either. I simply let it exist, as evidence that pain can lead to transformation, even if that transformation comes when it no longer matters to the one who was hurt. One afternoon in October, exactly 1 year after I arrived in Salamanca, I hosted a dinner party in my apartment. I invited Magdalena, Teresa, Pilar, and Amparo. I cooked a special mole with ingredients a friend sent me from Texas. I put on some classic boleros. I decorated the table with flowers. As we ate, Teresa raised her glass. To Carmen, for teaching us that it's never too late to choose yourself. To Carmen, they all repeated. To all of you, I said, my voice breaking. For taking in a lost woman from Texas. For giving me the family I chose, instead of the one that chose me. We toasted. We laughed. We told stories. And in that moment, surrounded by women I had known for only a year, but who understood me better than those who had known me my whole life, I knew I had found my place. It wasn't the United States. It wasn't Plano or San Antonio or any geographical location. My place was any space where I could be myself without apology, without guilt, without having to carry the weight of others' expectations. That night, before going to sleep, I took out the journal I had started writing. On the last page, I wrote, "Today I turned 69. No one wished me a happy birthday because no one knows it's my birthday except for me. And that's okay, because this day isn't for others to celebrate me. It's for me to celebrate myself. I celebrate myself for surviving, for healing, for letting go of what hurt me, for building something new when everything old had crumbled. If I could talk to the Carmen from a year ago, the one crying in that windowless room in Plano, I would tell her, hold on. The worst of it will pass. And on the other side, a version of you that you never imagined possible is waiting. A version that is free. I am no longer the mother who gives everything. I am no longer the wife who endures everything. I am no longer the invisible woman who exists only to serve. Now, I am simply Carmen, and that, I've discovered, is more than enough." I closed the journal. I turned off the light, and I slept deeply, without nightmares or regrets, because I had finally found what I had been searching for my whole life without knowing it. Not the love of others, but love for myself. And that, I finally understood, is something no one can take from you once you learn how to cultivate it. 3 years have passed since that morning in Plano, when Lauren screamed that they were not my bank. 3 years since my world collapsed and I had to rebuild myself from the ashes. I am 71 years old now. I live permanently in Salamanca. My apartment is filled with plants I tend to each morning, with books I read without rushing, with new photographs of faces I have chosen to have near me. Hope House is still running in San Antonio. It's no longer just one shelter, but 3 houses in different cities in Texas. We have helped more than 200 women leave situations of family abuse. Some have reconciled with their children. Others, like me, have learned that letting go is also a form of self-love. Stella calls me every Sunday. She tells me the neighborhood gossip, the weddings, the baptisms, who passed away, and who got married. She keeps my memory alive in the place I was born, even though my body is no longer there. Magdalena, Teresa, Pilar, Amparo, and I have formed an inseparable group. We still have tea on Thursdays, but now we also travel together. We went to Portugal last year, to Paris 6 months ago. Next year, we want to go to Italy. I travel as the person Robert always dreamed of being, but never could. I carry his ashes in a small locket around my neck. In every city, I whisper to him, "We made it, my love. We're seeing the world." My health is fragile, but manageable. I have an excellent Spanish doctor who monitors my heart with medications I can now afford without anxiety. I no longer get breathless climbing stairs. I no longer cry at night from a pain in my chest that was more emotional than physical. I have learned to cook Spanish dishes, to enjoy wine without guilt, to sit in cafes for hours watching people go by without feeling like I should be doing something more productive, to exist without justifying my existence. 6 months ago, Michael wrote me an email. I hadn't replied to him in 3 years, but this time I opened his message. "Mom, I got divorced. I lost my job. My teenage kids barely speak to me. I'm living alone in a small apartment, and for the first time in my life, I understand the loneliness you must have felt. The loneliness of having people around you who act as if you don't exist. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that you were right. About everything. Michael." I didn't reply, but I didn't feel any satisfaction from his suffering either. Just a distant sadness, like when you read about a stranger's misfortune in the newspaper. You regret that it happened to them, but it doesn't affect you personally. Sophia sent me an invitation to her wedding. She's getting married again, to someone named Arthur. On the invitation, she wrote by hand, "I know you won't come, but I wanted you to know that you're invited. You always will be. Love, Sophia." I put the invitation in my box of memories. I didn't go to the wedding, but I sent a gift. A set of hand-embroidered tablecloths that took me 2 months to make. No card, no explanation. Just my way of saying, I wish you well, but from a distance. Lauren still sends me letters every 3 or 4 months. She never expects a reply. She just writes. She tells me about her therapy, about how her children are growing up, about how she and David are trying to rebuild their marriage on a more honest foundation. She tells me she now volunteers at nursing homes, helping elderly women who are alone. Maybe if I help other mothers, she wrote in her last letter, I can one day forgive myself for how I treated mine. Her letters touch me, but they don't move me. It's like watching rain from behind a closed window. You acknowledge the storm, but you don't get wet. Have I forgiven them? People always ask that, as if forgiveness were a moral obligation. The truth is, forgiveness isn't black and white. It's not a switch you can flip on or off. Some days, I forgive them completely. I understand they were products of a society that taught them to consume and discard, even their own parents. Other days, I remember Lauren's scream, Michael's indifference, Sophia's cruel words, and the pain returns like a wave. But I no longer drown in that pain. I've learned to surf it. What I do know is that I no longer need them to be happy. And that is true freedom. One afternoon, while having coffee with Pilar at our favorite cafe, she asked me, Carmen, do you ever have regrets? About cutting them out of your life like that? I thought for a long time before answering. I regret many things, Pilar. Not setting boundaries sooner. Allowing myself to be treated like trash for so long. Confusing sacrifice with love. But about leaving them? No, I don't regret that. Because if I had stayed, if I had continued to allow that treatment, I would be dead by now. Maybe not physically, but emotionally. And I would rather be alive and alone than dead and accompanied. Pilar nodded in understanding. You know, when my brother died, everyone expected me to mourn him. But I didn't cry, because he had died for me years before, when he decided I wasn't good enough for his life. When he actually passed, I just felt nothing. Exactly, I said. My children died for me the day they stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as a burden. The fact that they are still alive and breathing somewhere in America doesn't change that. This morning I woke up early. I went out onto the balcony with my coffee and my shawl, though here in Spain they would call it a chal. The city was still asleep. The streets glistened from the overnight rain. The bells began to toll, announcing 7 in the morning. I looked toward the horizon where the sun was beginning to peek out between the old buildings, and I thought about the entire journey, about the Carmen I was and the Carmen I am. The old Carmen measured her worth by how much she could give to others. The new Carmen knows her worth depends on no one but herself. The old Carmen was terrified of being alone. The new Carmen understands that solitude and abandonment are not the same thing, that you can be alone without being abandoned, that you can have company without having a real connection. The old Carmen begged for love. The new Carmen understands that love you have to beg for isn't love. It's emotional begging. I took a sip of coffee. The warm liquid comforted me from the inside. I thought of Henry, of how he saw in me what my own children couldn't see. I thought of Robert, of how he loved me unconditionally, with no bank accounts or hidden agendas. And I asked myself, would I ever allow Lauren, Michael, or Sophia back into my life? The answer is complex. If one of them knocked on my door today, genuinely repentant, truly transformed, would I open it? Honestly, I don't know. What I do know is that I am no longer the woman who needs that validation. I am no longer the mother waiting for her children to finally see her, to value her, to love her as she loved them. I have built a life that does not depend on them. I have found purpose in helping other women. I have discovered love in friendships I chose, not in bonds imposed on me by blood. And maybe that's the most important lesson I've learned, that family isn't who gives you life, but who makes your life worth living. I finished my coffee. I went back inside the apartment. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror. I saw my completely white hair. the deep wrinkles around my eyes and mouth, the age spots on my hands. But I also saw something else. I saw a sparkle in my eyes. I saw a genuine smile. I saw a woman who finally likes herself. I looked at myself intently and said aloud, "Good morning, Carmen. Today is going to be a good day. Because you are alive. Because you are free. Because you are enough." And for the first time in 71 years of life, I completely believed it. Later, I have plans with Magdalena. We're going to an art exhibition. Then we'll have dinner at that Italian restaurant we love. Tomorrow I'll go to the market to buy fresh flowers for my apartment. The day after, I have a video call with the director of Hope House to check on how things are going. My schedule is full, but not with obligations, with choices. And that is the difference between the life I had and the life I have. Before, my days were filled with tasks others expected me to complete. Now, my days are filled with experiences I have chosen to live. Before, I slept exhausted from giving so much. Now, I sleep satisfied from receiving so much. Before, I wondered when it would be my turn to be happy. Now, I understand it was always my turn. I just had to be brave enough to take it. I leave the apartment. The crisp November air hits my face. I adjust my shawl. I walk along the cobblestone streets with a steady gait despite my arthritic knees. A young woman with a baby in her arms smiles at me as she passes. "Good morning, ma'am," she says. "Good morning, dear. What a beautiful baby." "Thank you. He's my treasure. Cherish him, but don't forget to cherish yourself too. A mother who loses herself can't guide anyone." She blinks, surprised by my words. She nods slowly. "I'll keep that in mind. Thank you." I continue walking, and I smile, because I know that maybe, just maybe, those words will change something for that young mother. Maybe they'll remind her that she matters too, that her needs count, that loving others doesn't mean disappearing. And if that happens, if my story can prevent another woman from ending up like I did, broken, abandoned, having to reinvent herself at 68, then it was all worth it. The pain, the betrayal, the self-imposed exile. It was all worth it if someone else learns before I did what took me almost 70 years to understand, that you can't pour from an empty cup, that self-love isn't selfishness, it's survival, that it's okay to say no, that it's okay to walk away, that it's okay to choose yourself, and that it is never, ever too late to start over.